Green Senator Sen Hansen-Young to begin a media conference in Canberra. In fact, it's just started now. This is on the Murray-Darling Basin plan.
Authority, of course, their final draft. It is now up to Minister Burke to fix this plan, and obviously it's encouraging to hear the Minister saying that he's not happy with the plan as is, because neither are the Greens, neither are many South Australians, neither are many of Australia's top scientists. The authority did not heed the serious concerns of Australia's top scientists in modelling a higher figure to be returned to the river, the 4,000 gigalitre figure as required by the best available science if we're to put this river on any type of sustainable footing for the future. It's necessary that this happens, and that's one of the key things that the Minister should now request of the authority, that they model that figure and that they work out how we can get more water down the river and what constraints can be overcome. We've just heard from the Minister about a number of the constraint issues. Some of these constraints are of course physical, some of them are policy, and some of them are constraint of political will. We need a plan that will deliver a future for the Murray-Darling Basin. We need a plan that will deliver for the future and not lock us into failure. The current plan, as is, will lock us into failure. It doesn't set us up for being able to manage what is a precious water source in the driest climates. It doesn't set us up for how to manage water in the most fairest way when the chips are down, and that is in the midst of drought. The Minister and of course Craig Knowles himself say that this plan is not a plan for drought. Well, why not? Because we can't just be talking about managing the water when there's plenty around. The need for a plan to manage the system fairly is most important in the drier times, most important particularly for South Australians in the drought. We know we've seen over the last decade just how unfair the over-allocation of the water in this system becomes when there is less water to be shared for everybody. South Australia has continued to miss out. The river has continued to miss out, and the environment has suffered. If we want a plan to save the future of the Murray-Darling Basin, it has to be a plan that tackles drought, that deals with those drying climates, and is one that we can adjust as need be based on that drying climate. Again, the authority has failed to include the impacts of climate change, and that of course is just lunacy in the view of the fact that this is meant to be a plan for the future.
Do you think that the plan delivers a triple bottom line outcome in its current form?
No, I don't. I think it's clear that this plan does not deliver for the environment. It doesn't put the environment on a steady footing for the future. And when the plan was first developed, when we sat down in this place and we passed the Water Act, it was about tackling the over-allocation of this system. For decades, more water has been taken out of the system than water that goes into it, and that is just not sustainable. 2,750 gigalitres does not tackle that over-allocation issue.
Senator Craig Knowles has proposed for the states to consider discussing an adaptable SDL that the authority could increase or decrease depending on what evidence came up about works and measures and constraint relief. What's your view about whether this is a good idea or not?
Well, it's a good idea if there is a basis level by what will be returned to the river in the first instance. We can only then discuss how we return more water as the river needs it, not less. It would be absolutely unacceptable to set up a process which would allow less water to be returned to the river simply because states continue their cross-border infighting and politics gets in the way. We need to make sure whatever SDL this plan delivers, it is one that is what the environment needs. Best available science tells us that's at least 4,000 gigalitres, and how we can increase that amount over time as the river needs it.
Given there's no indication either from the Minister or from the authority up until now that they're willing to consider anything like 4,000, I mean, are you concerned that that you won't be part of the negotiations that go on forward unless you're flexible?
Look, I'm very encouraged by the Minister's words today that he's not happy with the plan as is, and we are willing to work with the Minister to get this right. We want to see reform to the Murray-Darling Basin because it is the only way we can save this system, but it's got to be reform that delivers a healthy river and delivers for our communities to give them security into the future. 2,750 gigalitres doesn't do that. So we need to, of course, find a way of increasing that amount. Best available science tells us it's 4,000 gigalitres. The only issue with not delivering that we continue hearing from the authority is constraints. Well, let's name those constraints, look at them, put them out on the table and work out which ones we can overcome.
Are you willing to be flexible, and are you willing to sit down with Tony Burke and have a look at SDLs that are significantly lower than the 4,000 figure, but that, you know, sort of might be an improvement on what is the current case?
I'm meeting with the Minister this week, and I'll be putting to him that the first thing he should do is request that the authority models the 4,000 gigalitre figure. So at least we can have a basis for that discussion. And second to that, obviously open to talking with the government about how we can get real reform. The last thing we want is a plan to be locked in that locks in failure. And unfortunately, what we have in front of us would do that if it was to be ticked off by Parliament. So I'm willing to work with the government. The Greens want to be able to sit down with Minister Burke and work out a way through this, but we have to all have our eye on the ball, and that means a reform plan that will deliver for the drought as well as the wet.
The Victorian government has said today that they think the plan as is a death warrant for Victorian agricultural communities. Do you accept that there's real fear out there in irrigation communities in the basin about what this plan might do to their livelihood?
I do accept that there is concerns around this, and I also acknowledge that some have continued to fan those fears by virtue of the basic politics of this issue. This has been a political football. This river system has been a political football for decades, and what we know in this plan is, of course, South Australia has not increased its water extractions for 40 years, and while all the other upstream states have. Now, there is nothing in this plan that gives a nod to South Australia for doing the right thing. So not only is our environment going to lose out in South Australia if this plan was to pass as is, but our farmers are going to lose out as well. So these issues are obviously complex ones. But what I'm most concerned about is giving communities real certainty. And the only way that you give communities real certainty is making sure that we have a river worth saving, and worth saving beyond 2029 when this plan is meant to finalise. So if we don't have our eye on the ball in terms of the future, these communities have nothing to go by.
Do you have concerns, though, that if the Greens don't work with Labor on this plan?
Well, we're saying we're willing to. We are having these meetings this week. We're discussing where to move from here, how we can fix this plan. The Minister has said himself he's not happy with it. Well, neither are the Greens. Let's work out how we can fix it.
What makes you
Tony
think
Burke
it's
says
not
no to the modelling the 4,000. Is that the condition for you to talk further?
Well, I think it's an important aspect to this, because that is what all of Australia's top scientists have called for. All the top scientists in the country in these issues have all asked for 4,000 gigalitres to be modelled, so at least we have a basis of which to work on. Really, it should have been done 6 months ago. It needed to happen yesterday. Let's start it today.
What makes you think this isn't going to be a political football from here on, and what's your view of the coalition's position?
I think it already is. Well, don't get me wrong, I think it has been, it still is. And the issue here, of course, is who's standing up for the environment. It's not the opposition, it's not the Victorian government, it is Australia's top scientists, the Greens, and my constituents in South Australia who have seen firsthand when we don't listen to the needs of the environment, communities suffer, and they will continue to suffer into the future unless we produce a plan that will give certainty for a healthy river.
Are you concerned that if a basin plan doesn't get through Parliament in this political term and the coalition was to win the next election, that the reform would just be shelved indefinitely and there would be no result for any of the basin states?
So I come back to the point about not wanting to lock in a failed plan. We want reform for the future. We want a plan that will deliver a healthy river. What we don't want is a plan that will lock in failure. That would be worse than nothing. Okay.
Just clarifying the question of revising the SDLs from 2015. Were you saying that you would be happy with that, but only if they could be revised up?
Look, what I'm saying is there were two options in that letter from the authority. There was the revising down and the revising up. Revising down is not an option.
But just with your immigration hat on, there seems to be a bit of a caucus revolt over the enterprise migration programs. Do you think this is an opportunity for Labor Party to review that policy?
I think it has to be reviewed in terms of what are the real legislative and regulatory indicators to ensure that these types of projects actually do the things that the government says they're going to do. Where are the protections for these workers' rights? Where are the protections for ensuring that Australian workers get first dibs on these jobs? Where are the guarantees that work has been done? None of that is in either legislation or in regulation. It's simply hearsay from the government, and that needs to be tightened. Thank you.
Your expert scientists that have views on 4,000 gigalitres, what do they say about bringing water down from the north of Australia, say the Ord, to service the basin? Has that been a consideration?
As a bypass through the basin, around the basin? Oh, look, I think most of the Australia's top scientists and those that have written into the authority with their submissions suggest the best way of saving the river is to put the water back that was originally there. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so that was the Green Senator Sen Hansen-Young live from Parliament House in Canberra. Very disappointed with the final report of the Murray-Darling Basin Authority plan released this morning. Ms Hansen-Young is adamant more water has to be returned to the system. According to this revised draft, it makes no changes to the previous proposed cut to water entitlements of 2,750 gigalitres. She says the scientists' concerns have been ignored and to agree to the plan would be to lock in failure.